So welcome to the Fall 23 Literary Tea. Dorothy Schiff Shannon, our workshop leader and moderator, is going to get us started on the literary tea.
Okay.
Ready? I am going to finish here. Give me 1 minute. Okay, here we go.
Okay, welcome everyone to the literary tea. I want to call your attention to the beautiful photo on the cover of our book by Dawn Stone.
It's a watercolor.
A watercolor. Cover photo. Oh, it's a watercolor. Yes, of course it is.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Yes, I knew it was a painting, but it says photo. So it's a photo of a watercolor.
It is.
Yeah.
In your yard, right?
Yeah.
In your yard.
Yes, very appropriate for today. And our first reader is Pat Dallin, who I saw on the screen. And Pat has a beautiful piece to read to us today. And if Pat is ready, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I'm unmuted, correct?
Yes, perfect.
This is called The Beauties Around Me. Although the roses of summer are fading, there are many buds on the Montauk daisies, telling me that I can expect a riot of white flowers next week. I've recently bought a river birch tree and had it professionally planted on my front lawn. It has small leaves, several stems instead of one trunk, and it waves to me in the wind. I speak to my plants inside and out of the house. I've heard that the exhalation of carbon dioxide is helpful for plants to absorb. But that doesn't really concern me. I just simply enjoy my one-sided conversation with them. The river birch doesn't have a name yet, but inspiration will come to me as it did for the princessa weed, which flourishes in my backyard. I stopped the Hispanic gardeners who came to cut her down by telling them, no, esta bonita, and the name stuck. The gardeners may have murmured, la vieja loco, the old lady is crazy, but they smiled indulgently and let her be. She, my bonita, is 6 feet tall and has huge green leaves. It seems that she's in the foxglove family and is native to East Asia. She's visible through the picture window in my living room, and each day I call out, "Good morning, bonita." I can swear she ruffles her giant leaves in answer as the wind rustles through them. In the square garden in the front, we once had a tall, beautifully formed blue spruce. Sitting by the door during one windstorm, I heard a loud crack, and the sound pierced my heart. I knew instinctively what it was. Our lovely pine had gone down. For years, I waited for something to take the place of privilege in the center of the square, and finally ordered a crepe myrtle for the spot. He, with his fiery red plumes shooting upwards like fireworks, is now the focal point of the square. Only now are his colors fading in time with the fall. He has no name, though, and I can't say why. He's clearly masculine, strong, and assertive. Usually my kind of guy. My husband was such a one. Incidentally, I have named this crepe myrtle Flame since I wrote this. 52 years ago, when we bought this house, we found a somewhat scraggly rose bush hanging its head by the patio alcove. Don uprooted it and planted the bush where I could see it. I had friends in the Sable Garden Club, one of whom was Eloise Nye, a rose expert. She analyzed the pink floribunda and determined that, far from being nondescript, the roses it displayed were a fine Queen Elizabeth variety. Not only did this bush thrive and grow to a height of almost 7 feet, but each June it favored us with a mass of wonderful and fragrant pink roses. I'm happy I took a picture of it one June, because after Superstorm Sandy flooded this area, the brackish water woefully harmed the bush's roots and stunted its blooming for 11 years. It's just now reviving and is 2 feet tall. I can wait a number of years more for it to return to its former glory, but not too many more years, I guess. Come on, Rose. Dotted around the property are several knockout rose plants, so hardy and self-sustaining. The drought did not dismay them. They just kept on keeping on. That's pretty much what I'm doing myself. The end.
You can tell that Pat is an artist as well as a writer, and that she's an outgoing, friendly person, even with her plants, and that she has a lot of humor. And let's go on to another humorous one. Is Richard Bronstein here?
Yes.
Okay.
If you're reading along, it's been edited a little bit. I didn't realize it was gonna be printed up for today, but
Okay.
when I saw the announcement for some people to contribute, this is something I've lived with for 50 years, and I always wanted to write it down. I've told these stories many times before, but never wrote it down. I call it lessons. I don't think a day goes by that I don't learn something. It could be something new or something old that has faded. It could be new facts or new insights into human nature, codes of conduct. In March of 1970, I was inducted into Army service and commenced my basic training, where I received many new lessons. BCT, or Basic Combat Training, has been around since 1917. But in the 60s, after a congressional review found many deficiencies in the training, an overhaul occurred that led to many reforms, of which I was both a beneficiary and probably a victim. But either way, many lessons were to be learned. A lot of the screaming and yelling at us persisted, but the screaming and yelling seemed to have a bit more humanity and understanding. A year earlier, I was admitted to the bar of New York. And 4 days later, I was married. I was telling people then that I was admitted and committed in the same week. Little did I know that 11 months later, I would be admitted into and committed to a different type of institution. When I reported for duty at Fort Dix, New Jersey, I was aged 25, overweight, out of shape, and overeducated. The Army didn't have a problem with any of those qualities. The first two were handled within the first 2 to 3 weeks. I lost about 15 pounds and was lean and strong. The third quality was mine to deal with. I remember a training sergeant asking me if it was true that I was a lawyer. I had a feeling where this was headed. When I acknowledged it was true, he asked me how many years of education I had. I counted 12 for elementary through high school, 4 for undergraduate college, and 3 for law school, and somewhat nervously told him 19. He was duly impressed, and then told me to pick up the cigarette butts lying on the ground. Yes, Sergeant, was the only correct reply. Drill sergeants are responsible for coaching, counseling, and mentoring trainees in transforming them from civilians to combat-ready soldiers. My drill sergeant Hicks easily fulfilled those responsibilities. During our training, we were told not to miss marksmanship testing because if you did, you would be recycled into a different company and put back a week. Nobody wanted that. On the morning of the testing, I woke up sick with a fever, but not wanting to miss marksmanship said nothing. On the chow line, my drill sergeant must have seen that I was sick and said, "Hey, lawyer, you okay?" Sergeant Hicks often called me lawyer, and once actually asked me for some legal advice. When I told him I felt sick but didn't want to miss marksmanship, he told me he would have me among the first to shoot, and then he would have me driven back to the infirmary. He called our platoon together for a pep talk and explained that he would have the best marksman shoot first as a model for the rest, and then called out the names, with the first being Bronstein. Bronstein, dead silence. Bronstein definitely did not have a reputation as a marksman. If I hadn't been so sick, I probably would have laughed. After I did my shooting and somehow hit the targets through the fog of my fever, I could hear Sergeant Hicks arguing with the lieutenant that he needs the ambulance to take Bronstein back to the infirmary. And the lieutenant saying that the ambulance is there in case somebody gets shot. Great, I'm thinking. Now I have to figure out a way to get myself shot so I can get a ride back to treat my fever. My sergeant won the argument, and on the ride to the infirmary, I was so sick that I kept thinking I'd probably been better off if I had been shot. By the time I got to the infirmary, my throat had become so sore and raw, it felt like my entire platoon had marched over it. Upon arrival, the medic stuck a thermometer in my mouth while I was burning up. When he withdrew it, he put his hand on my shoulder, sort of like that, and said, "Holy shit, don't die on us, trainee. We're gonna get you right to the hospital." I had a temperature of 104 and was suffering from rubella that was rampant at the base. The hospital was so full, there was no hospital room for me. I was put in a waiting room that was converted into a hospital room for 4 of us and recovered in about 72 hours. But empathy only goes so far, as I was soon to learn. We were all told that there were no passes for getting off the base during the 8 weeks of basic training, so don't bother asking. We were stuck in Fort Dix for the duration. But I decided to risk being a smartass and use my legal training to try to bluff my way off the base or Passover. I told my platoon sergeant that Passover was an important Jewish holiday, and he had to let us go home for the Seder, a religious service. He bumped me up to the first sergeant, who then passed me on to the captain, a Vietnam vet who probably wanted to be anywhere else than training us to be soldiers. He asked if I thought I could make up the missed day of training. We were in the middle of bayonet training, where we were learning how to gut the enemy. I told him I felt confident I could catch up. To my shock, he gave me and the other Jews a 24-hour pass. I went home, spent the night, went to a Seder, and returned within 24 hours. The next morning, my company reported for continuing bayonet training. The class was being given by none other than our captain. He had never done this before. I felt a sense of foreboding. About 100 of us were gathered on the ground, and he called for a volunteer. Before anyone could respond, he called out, "Bronstein, get up here." Not a good sign. I was told to stand about 10 yards away from him and face him. He then fixed his bayonet on the end of his M16, raised it over his right shoulder, and told us, "Men, this is the correct way to attack your enemy soldier with a bayonet," and then ran full tilt at me as if he was going to make shish kebab out of me. I stood there, frozen to the spot. he stopped 2 feet in front of me and brought the rifle and bayonet down at my chest, stopping the blade an inch from my fatigue jacket, and then drawing a diagonal crease across my jacket. While I just barely managed to keep last night's matzo ball soup and brisket from coming up all over him. I often wondered if he expected me to thank him for the wonderful lesson he taught me, but I never did.
Very funny.
Very
Because
cute.
that a lot of us read about the Second World War. Does anybody know what it is? And remember?
Catch-22.
Yeah, yeah, that's what this song reminds me of. Okay, Joel Cohen.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the invitation. In 1982, my wife and I, along with friends we met on our Aruba honeymoon in October 80, decided to attempt to repeat the great time we had in Aruba with another trip. We tried to get couples Jamaica, but they were all booked up, so we got St. Lucia. The accompanying song was written chiefly by me at the request of hotel management as part of a show to be put on by the guests. St. Lucia was 180 degrees from Aruba, perhaps not nautically, but in real terms. And here goes the little ditty. Down St. Lucia way, we eat bananas every day. Down St. Lucia way, we eat them every way. Welcome to St. Lucia, a paradise, take a look. We tried to get Jamaica, but we heard that it was booked. We wake up every morning and listen to a lot of rain. Why did we come to St. Lucia? We must have been insane. The food they serve's delicious, and those native fruits of St. Lucia. But once you let it settle, you have to pusha. Have you tried to go swimming in the beautiful ocean here? If you get over all the rocks, then I'll buy you a beer. Down in old St. Lucia, they take you to the volcano. The natives try to sell you rocks that you can pick up by your toes. We had a very nice day on the Buccaneer. We did cruise, but when we got to Soufriere, they tried to steal our shoes. The currency here is EC and very, very hard to change. It may be EC for you, but it's not easy for me. I wanted a pina colada, but they told the blend is broke. I got so tired of waiting that I wound up with a Coke. No Cokes there, Pepsi. Oh, it's 4 o'clock now. Everybody run to exercise. We don't want to be late now, or else we'll be another size. Tomorrow we go to the airport, and we're awfully sad for that. But there's no need to worry because we'll probably have a flat. Despite this little song, we really did have a ball. We hope you had some fun, and we want to thank you all.
Many talents, so I'll remember.
Thanks again.
Okay, Len, is Len here?
It's Mike Billman.
Mike Dole. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, there you
Okay.
go.
Okay. I wrote this a few weeks ago for the memoir class, so if you heard it, I apologize, but you heard it didn't. Okay, this is called The Pool. It's 1961, new decade, time of change. New president, new frontier, space race, a new National League team next year in New York. It's the year I will turn 11, the year we will have a new home. We have moved from our apartment in a Brooklyn neighborhood sandwiched between East Flatbush and Brownsville to a 3-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of a new 2-family house in Canarsie. There's a small lawn in front of the house and more green around us than we're used to. Still Brooklyn, and the distance from our old apartment to our new one is only a few miles along the route of the Remsen Avenue bus, but it feels like we're in a different world. Our kitchen has a large window over the sink which overlooks a courtyard and faces the kitchen window of our new neighbors, Irene and Jerry. They have 2 sons, Barry, a year older than my sister Ellen, and Warren, 2 years older than me. When the windows are open, our families can converse across the courtyard, and we often do. "Yoo-hoo, Mrs. Goldberg," my mother calls, referencing a line from an ancient TV show. And despite her initial protest, Please, he's just not my type. Ellen agrees to go out with Barry, and 4 years later, they'll be married. Yes, she literally married the boy next door. I will live in this apartment for the next decade until my wedding in December of 1971. I'll go to PS 115, to John Wilson Junior High School, and then to the brand new Bildersee Junior High School. I'll be a member of the first graduating class of Canarsie High School, class of 67, and then move on to Brooklyn College, still living at home and now commuting to the campus on the J bus. New home, new neighborhood, new schools. The 3 or 4 attached houses on our block are identical. Our rear windows look out on a community drive, a stretch of concrete between our garages on one side and a 3-foot wall with a small plot of grass above it on the other. My parents, along with Irene and Jerry, decided that this driveway is wide enough to be a suitable space for, of all things, a swimming pool. It's above ground, 3-foot pool. A ladder straddles the side wall, but most adults could easily step over the side to get in. The pool looks quite out of place, almost ridiculous, in the middle of the concrete driveway, but we are more than happy to have it. It becomes a magnet for guests, friends, my aunt and uncle, my cousins, and assorted others. We have a small barbecue grill, some beach chairs, and a few inflatable floats and rafts. We leave the garage doors open so that those who want to avoid the summer sun can sit inside for a while. A pool and backyard are not luxurious, not upscale by any means, not really even a backyard. But for a couple of years, they helped to create our pseudo-suburban summer lifestyle. We have good times. We swim, if you want to call it that. We throw a ball around, and we enjoy trying to knock unsuspecting victims off their rafts. Occasionally, though, we need to get into the pool with buckets to bail out the water, clean the liner, and refill the pool with fresh water from the garden hose. One night, I'm out with my parents at the Valley Stream Drive-In, seeing the first James Bond film, Dr. No, which, by the way, causes a good deal of embarrassment to a 12-year-old watching it with his parents. When we get home, we see Ellen and Barry out by the pool. They left the damn hose running, the whole thing overflowed. Their annoyance at being left to deal with this mess is evident and justified. The ever-present transistor radio placed near the pool brings me the voices of Mel Allen, Red Barber, and Phil Rizzuto describing the 1961 pennant race between the Yankees and the Tigers, as well as the historic excitement of Mantle and Maris chasing Babe Ruth's record. On a hot August day in 1962, it brings us the news of the shocking death of Marilyn Monroe. And of course, there's the ever-present music. The Shirelles, Chubby Checker, Ray Charles, the Beach Boys, the Four Seasons, Peter, Paul, and Mary, delivered to us by the WMCA Good Guys or by Cousin Brucey. We're on the verge of the Beatles and the British invasion. More change around the corner. That pool, that driveway, become the backdrop for the soundtrack of my 11th and 12th summers. Today, I refuse to be an aging baby boomer glorifying some imaginary good old days. The early 60s were rife with sexism, racism, homophobia, and a Cold War mentality. We were on the precipice of Vietnam assassinations and social convulsions. As Billy Joel sang, the good old days weren't always good, and tomorrow ain't as bad as it seems. But as I remember those summers in the early 60s, I think about how many of our fellow Brooklynites would have loved to have had that pool and that yard. At least for a time, we accepted what we had and what we could do, rather than bemoaning what we lacked or what we might aspire to. We did the best we could, and that wasn't bad.
Well-written trip to the early 60s, with details. But now, yes, Lynn.
Lynn Verano.
He's up there.
Yeah, my name is spelled wrong, but don't worry about that. I do that all the time. Nix the prefix. What happened to those hidden words that take a dark rear seat and never are the juicy ones we'd like a chance to meet? They're always seen with prefixes like dis and none and un. Don't they deserve a decent shot at being number one? Are writings ever delible? Do folks act just chalant? Can penmanship be peccable? Are gruntle souls in one? Should I appear just shoveled? Would that make me less puerile? Would I be labeled plus if concern I can't conceal? Let's pull ourselves together and once more appear quite raveled. Dump alternate notations and choose the road less traveled. You can sense my strong intention to restore these words that rate. So come and join me in this quest and we'll combobulate. By now you're kind of wondering if this silly goal is reachable. And clearly you've concluded that its author is so peachable.
Now, Jordan, are you on? There he is.
This is called Resort Summer Busboy. Start with a quote. Every time I get to thinking about me being black and they being white, me being here and they being there, I feel like something awful's going to happen to me. From Native Son by Richard Wright. In the summer of 1960, I was promoted from pot washer to a busboy at a 5-star restaurant on the Jersey Shore. It was a promotion that I did not seek or want. My last day as a pot washer was without ceremony or tearful goodbyes. My co-workers, Joe Snow, Tookie, and Crowbait, were men accustomed to just moving on. When I told Crowbait about the promotion, he said to me, "Son, jump on any good shit the white man gives you, because he's going to send you a heap of bad shit." He was right. By late August, they were gone. My parents' reaction to my promotion was a mix of pride, joy, and anxiety. They knew that I was venturing into uncharted waters. They also sensed my own apprehension about dealing with the restaurant guests, new co-workers, and no one at work to help me lay my burdens down. In a desperate attempt to feel comfortable in my new role, I tried on my uniform several times and looked in the mirror. A pair of black pants, white shirt, vest, bow tie, cummerbund, and yes, my Sunday go-to-meeting shoes. I looked like Rastus, the smiling butler on the cream of wheat cereal box. Prior to my promotion, I only caught quick glimpses of the grand dining room, but enough to know that I preferred my slop sink hidden deep within the bowels of the kitchen. Happily, I was far from the guests arriving in Cadillacs, accompanied by uniformed drivers with on-demand rehearsed toothy smiles, white gloves, and distinctive black hats that kept them in their place. We were worlds apart, but somehow had an intimate relationship at the dinner table. My pots cooked their expensive gourmet meals. The large dining room was daunting, fascinating, and overwhelming, and unwelcoming. It was a luxuriously display of linen napkins and stiffly starched tablecloths with razor sharp edges. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. The numerous pieces of polished silverware and excuse me, and Bell Perfect crystal glassware rested comfortably at each place setting. I looked up and observed the huge, fancy, ornate chandeliers casting white reflections on the ceiling and dark tapestry walls depicting centaurs and half-naked women. A highly polished dance floor yearned for dancing, but it was only an ornament and a conversation piece. The thought of my dancing the boogaloo, the crossfire or mashed potato on that floor brought a smile to my face. Jim, the restaurant manager, who promised me, who promoted me, was not big on ceremony. My introduction to coworkers was quick, and his order spoken to no one in particular. This is Al, and he will be working with you. I expect you to show him what to do. My coworkers were not impressed. Waitresses, waiters, and busboys went to assigned workstations and left me standing there. I did not anticipate hugs, but certainly not this reception. I knew day one that this job was going to be a real challenge for me, and that I did not look forward to it at all. A distinct caste system existed among the staff. The waitresses and waiters were older, and many of them were lifers. This job was their livelihood and supported their families. Their professional business-like approach allowed them to easily mingle with the guests. They always appeared to be too busy, aloof, and unapproachable to help me. Time was money. The busboys were younger, seasonal workers, a mix of college students, high school and college students. Some of them were rich kids whose parents insisted they work for the experience. They were easy to spot. Several made attempts to befriend me, only to learn then their motive. The black dude might be able to score some weed or provide them a safe passage in the black community. I stayed away from them. I was certainly not looking to become a lifer, but my parents needed the money. I never discussed any with my parents about what was going on at work. I am sure they knew something was wrong. After my promotion, I stopped talking about my job and grew sullen and moody. I tried to bury my fears and frustrations. Besides, I wanted to handle my own business. The one time I went to Jim, he referred me to an older waiter who was an active participant in my discomfort. Jim refused to send me back to pot washing. Several weeks into the job, I knew my days were numbered. Absolutely none of the staff would help me. On occasion, I would be ordered by the older members to clean up a mess or spend hours in disgusting bathroom duty. I spent days trying to look busy, but I was clearly not in sync or respected. I was invisible. Somehow the word circulated that I was a former pot washer, and I was then viewed by coworkers as less than a busboy. Waitresses and waiters began to complain to Jim that I was in the way, too slow or too threatening to approach. Even the pot-smoking rich boys said the job was too complicated for me. I never saw 1 cent from the tip pool, as Jim had promised. I held up as best I could, but I could feel my 15-year-old mindset beginning to overpower my need for a job. I began to strike back. Then one day, in slow motion, I watched as a white porcelain bowl of half-eaten tomato basil soup slipped from my nervous neophyte hands and soak the black tuxedo, splash, freshly shaven face, bow tie, and bulging neck, splatter the ruffled front shirt designer tuxedo, stained the gold, Rolex, silk socks, Gucci shoes, and fall innocently to the floor. Sorry, sir. My apology was automatic, weak, and without remorse. The guest was not impressed. The dining room grew silent as the man screamed, cursed, and hurled racial epithets at me. I heard none of it. I had shut down. I was foolishly celebrating payback. The other cheek had turned for the last time. Pragmatic Jim, the same man who elevated my status, took it all back. He fired me on the spot. I had a momentary sense of relief, but I cannot go home unemployed. My search for another job began immediately. That's it. I apologize for my voice, folks. Thank you.
Now you see why we in the memoir class are always urging Al to publish. He has lots of them, just as good. Okay, let's go to Hatch. Tony, is Tony here?
Tony Parlator? I don't think he's
Not
on.
here. Okay, so then,
Shelley, sorry. Shelley too.
Shelley.
Okay. This is just one of my stories in my collection of stories that I've written, a little memoir that I choose not to publish. I just love sharing them with anybody that will listen. As if we were one. Excuse me. One day, a patient came back from having a minor procedure, which required minimal sedation. I performed the usual routine tasks, checking her blood pressure and heart rate, and asked if she was having any pain. She began to cry. On further questioning, she denied pain, but told me she was crying over the death of her daughter. She had died from cancer. I took one of her hands in mine and began to stroke her shoulder and smooth back her hair with my other hand. As I looked into her tear-filled eyes, I felt myself well up with tears, but immediately stopped myself, saying to myself, I have to be strong for her. I cannot cry. But then I told myself that times had changed since 1964 when I was studying to be a nurse, when emotions were held at bay, to be strong. I allowed the tears to flow down my cheeks, and for perhaps only 1 minute, the only two people in the room, in the world, were me and my patient. It was as if we were one. The moment passed, she smiled and thanked me. I silently thanked her for helping me move into a new stage of my profession, one where I felt human.
Hearing your nursery stories, and I think every time I've been sitting in this chair, we've had one. This is one of a very nice series. Okay, Bob.
Musings. I watched the jackal whining on an earth cam monitoring a water hole in Namibia. The jackal was afraid of some cheetahs who showed up while she was having a drink. The jackal has no words, only squeals of simple terror. We have words. They name things to remember and tell us things to plan. We operate, do things to keep alive. Sometimes we find it useful to cooperate, to temporarily work together to further our self-interest. But in the end, we each die alone. I watched the first moving pictures of people strolling or purposefully striding on the streets of New York or Paris. And I realized that every one of them, from the old folks leaning on canes to the infants in prams, is dead. The world will end for me in 5 minutes or 5 years. Soon the waters will rise, the air will choke. In a few billion years, the seas will boil away, and the earth will be swallowed up by the sun. Then eventually the universe will end. Should I worry about my grandchildren, my grandchildren's children? Should I worry about the human species that will sooner or later die out or be replaced? Will I worry about them when I'm gone? Does my grandmother lie awake in her cloud worrying about her great-great-grandchildren? I wonder if she puts her halo on the next day of it, where she used to keep the glance with her first teeth. Are the souls of the dead subject to be drafted into a new life, perhaps in a new universe? Life is not always silk pillows and chocolate. I might find myself herded behind barbed wire or buried under the ash of a volcano. It can't all be 1%ers.
He comes to me, he paints, he writes poetry, and he's a scientist. Okay, Ginny?
Muted, she's muted.
This is called Woo Woo, and it's about my teaching my son how to drive. He did give permission for me to tell this. Dad, Jin, I want to get a motorcycle. I have enough saved up. No, Todd, you know your father's friend got killed going over the George Washington Bridge. I'll never be going over that bridge. Doesn't matter. End of discussion. I was still navigating my way as a new bride and stepmother to 4 kids, 2 at home. My husband Ernie was on the downside of worrying about teenagers. Todd was his 4th, my first. I was the newbie zealot. Todd, your father and I have decided that you can get your permit and sign up for driver's ed. Driving the car is safer than driving a motorcycle. Jin, would you take me driving? Of course. Did you ask your father? Yes, he said you have more patience. Okay. Todd, let's go to the elementary school parking lot so you can learn the car. My driving teacher said that's a bad idea. We're doing it anyway. Change places with me. Okay, start the car. Observe. Go forward about 20 feet. Stop. Observe. Turn right. Observe. Stop. Can we drive on the streets now? Todd, we usually stay on the inside of the double yellow line. Jin, take your feet off the dashboard. I've got this. Son about you cut off my son. Jin, Dad is going to be mad that I taught you how to curse. Okay, Todd, you passed your test. This is my car for work. No speeding. Be careful. No going down the Port Jeff Hill with the windows open, music blaring, and going woo-woo. Woo-woo, seriously? Well, then you can't sing or dance in front of my friends. Decades pass. Todd is 59. We lost Ernie in 1994 and circled into a smaller, more tightly knit family. His siblings and he, his wife and kids, welcomed Bob as family in 2003. Then the teasing extended to Grandpa Bob. Todd still brags that he taught me how to curse. From California, he regularly teases about woo-woo and singing in front of his friends. In 2010, I joined the church choir. With 3,000 miles between us, I baited Todd. Every Sunday, I sing in front of your friends. Heckle, heckle, Josh, Josh. Even his kids join me in teasing. 2022, my dear Bob passed away. I inherited his 2010 Sebring hardtop convertible. I had to care for it, but couldn't drive it. Probate. The towing company dropped it at my house. I drove it around in circles at the top of my driveway just to keep the battery going and the tires moving for 15 months. September 23rd, 2023. I registered the car, put my new plates on, and took it for a 50-mile shakedown drive. Todd, here's a picture of me in the convertible, I texted. Yes, I did drive it down the Port Jeff Hill. The radio was blaring. I was singing. I definitely heard someone go, whoa, whoa.
Great humor. The vehicles serve to link the great family life. Okay, did we finish?
That's everyone, yeah.
That's it. Nobody
Unless
was left out.
Parlator joins, but I don't think he did.
Very nice. Yeah. Have such talent.